Well, all right. It's 4 o'clock. Personnel Committee meeting. Mr. McGee is in transit. He will be here, I don't know, probably in 15, maybe 20 minutes max. So what we're going to do is, I spoke to him. I'm going to call the committee to order at our regular time and pass it over when he gets here. Ms. Hefner is also a member of the committee. She'll be here shortly. So for the time being, I'm on the committee, and I guess I can, since this isn't regulatory, we'll deputize Mr. Warner and Mr. Cusick for now. And we'll call the committee meeting to order. Attendance, me. And all right, so the first order of business is the courtesy of the floor. Do you have anyone who would like to have any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Review of the county executive's appointments, reappointment. Children, Youth, and Families Advisory Board. Are there any questions or comments regarding the appointment of Marquet Grundy to the Children, Youth, and Family Advisory Board? I don't know if Mr. Grundy's here, if you'd like to. No? Okay. I'll ask for a motion to present to County Council for approval. Lori, give me a motion. Just say I make a motion.
I make a motion.
All right. A motion's been made. I'm going to second it. Would we like to present Ms. Grundy's name to the council for approval for the Children, Youth, and Advisory Board?
What I move?
Just for an appointment. It's not just yes. The county's waiting. Yes. 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 To move it to the.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Good. All right. Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. All right. Next appointment is for the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. Are there any questions or comments regarding the appointment of Greg Zabrowski to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission? I'm not going to say anything. So far, it's me and you today. So.
Okay, motion to approve.
Okay, I'll second, and we'll move that on to the presented to County Council. Now we move to the Open Space Advisory Board. Are there any questions or comments regarding the reappointment of Pamela Kistler to the Open Space Advisory Board? Ask for a motion to present. Okay, I'll second. So it will be presented to County Council. All right, now we're going to have the review of the personnel request from the District Attorney's Office. Are there any questions or comments regarding the elimination of 3 full-time clerical technician 3 positions and the creation of 3 full-time clerical specialist positions at the District Attorney's Office? Seeing none, Mr. Morganelli is at the podium. Would you like to address this?
Thank you, Chairman Heckman and members of Council. Just briefly, I had sent a memo to all of you. I copied you on the memo to Elizabeth Kelly with this request dated April 3rd. And essentially, what we're finding is that these 3 positions we're having difficulty filling them. We've had people we've brought in and we've worked training them, and a week goes by and they're just not catching on. These jobs require a lot more than just the clerical work that's done by, for example, our receptionist. We have a file clerk, and we also have an ARD clerk. And we've had also trouble keeping people because of the fact that it's not a higher grade specialist position. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and with the recent departure of one of our girls, and we had difficulty training a second woman to do these jobs that we were looking at, we had to move some people around. And so my thinking is that this would upgrade our office, make it easier to keep these folks who are beyond the work of just a clerk, and their pay gets bumped a little bit. As you see, before I wrote this to council, I did consult with Brandon of the budget office to find out how much money this would result in for this year, and really we're talking about $4,000, and we have sufficient funds in our budget, so there's really no money issue here. It's a matter of efficiency and keeping our office going in terms of the specialty work that these positions do. So I feel that it's in the interest of the office. I'm hoping I can get the support of council, and I think this will help us moving forward in terms of keeping people in this position a little longer in light of the fact that it's an upgrade, and also attracting poor people down the road for those who do leave. So that's my request for council.
Any questions for the district attorney? All right.
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Take your
Yep.
time. We got time.
So the 2B position is a higher level position?
The clerical specialist is a step up from the clerical 3 position, yes. So these are, as Chairman Heckman indicated, the proposal would be to eliminate the 3 clerical 3 positions and have them replaced with the clerical specialist position. And as I said, we're talking about a very small difference in the hourly rate, quite frankly, but it's still, it's still more money, and it's a little bit better position, slightly more.
Okay. Any questions other than that? All right. Well, is there a motion to present this to County Council for approval?
Motion.
I'll make a second. All right.
Okay.
We'll be presenting it tomorrow night.
It'll be on tomorrow. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
members of council.
All right. Next, we'll move on to a review of the licensed practical nurse, registered nurse tuition assistance program. Are there any comments or any questions regarding the proposed licensed practical nurse registered tuition assistance program from the audience? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Well, not in the audience,
Yeah,
not right now, not yet.
Okay.
The only concern, I think this is a great program. One of the things that we have at our school, though, is if you get your master's degree and to become a principal or superintendent, there is a clawback period for a certain number of years. So I guess my question or concern is that I don't want to be giving someone tuition reimbursement and then have them take their newly minted RN or LPN and walk out the door. Could
Correct.
you maybe talk about what the clawback, if there is one, and have you included that as part of this program?
It is in the policy. Folks will be required to, first of all, you have to be an employee in good standing with, no unexcused absences. There's a whole lot of criteria for a year before you can apply. So you're already at Grace-Dale a year. Say you're going for the RN program, that's 2 years. You have to give back 2 more years to us. So I think that answers your question.
Okay.
It's a 2-year give back. And so part of the thought process there is 5 years, of course, is the magic number for investing, full investment in the pension. And so hopefully that's just yet another tool for retention of those folks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess then the follow-up would be, if they do choose to go someplace else, will fiscal give them a bill for their tuition, and how would we go about collecting that?
Sure.
Because we can't force somebody to stay. I mean, Abe Lincoln stopped that a long time ago.
Well, I'll take your word for that. Because maybe history is not my forte, but we'll leave it at that. So it is my understanding, I can get more information on that for you. It is my understanding that what other agencies have done is withholding of final paychecks. That will not repay $12,000 in our tuition. So that conversation we certainly have not had yet. It's something, we can do. We have the capability of doing that, but whether we would or not remains to be seen. Mary Lou actually brought, Mary Lou Caboli, she's the what are you, the Deputy Director of Human Services? I should know that, except she does HR at Graysdale, so it escapes you from time to time, but
I will say that we do have in the agreement that they agree to repay the money if they don't stay the 24 months. Now, how we'll go after them, I don't know, but it is something that they have to agree to in the agreement.
But do they have to sign it or something?
Yes, yes.
Oh.
If I may, let me tell you, Human Resources,
Come on up.
having an agreement that says the employee agrees to repay the county would set the stage for us being able to refer it to our legal department,
Right.
solicitor's office, and that they could then go to, take some legal measures to capture them.
Yeah, I mean, and if I could say, I know we tried, and by the way, hello, Mary Lou. I didn't know you were the assistant director, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, we tried to do similar things, and I remember we did in the past, and I guess the issue is, as you pointed out with your historical reference, I mean, it is tough to, you're sort of putting that onus, I don't know if anybody can speak to that, but yeah, it is kind of tough. You're doing the right thing. I don't know if in fact, at the end of the day, what legal or what things can be done, but you're certainly laying out the way I guess you would have to lay it out. But it makes sense.
And
to me,
our
at least.
goal, you know, long-term goal is not just to recruit new staff, but to retain the staff. You want to mention that before I?
Yeah, I
go on?
brought, one of our nursing staff sent this article. It was in the Express in 1988 when this program was first around. So this was a popular program. There are, I believe, 10 people in this picture. 3 people, she said, are still there. So it is a tool for retention. People feel very loyal to a place where they can go and that support them and promote them. So.
Go ahead.
So are these programs generally only admission during the fall semester, or would there be opportunity to admit in the fall and the spring?
So the RN program admits in both the fall and the spring. The LPN program admits in the fall only. Is that, did I
That's
get that
correct.
And then on the even calendar years, there's also spring admission for, I believe, the LPN program. So it's a little bit crazy. But the math that we gave you is for the 2019 budget was 5 RN positions and 10 LPN positions. So the total dollar amount is, because folks can apply for the spring semester for the RN program and the fall semester for the LPN program.
And the reason we started with the spring is that the deadline has already passed for
Correct.
fall. So that's why it's starting with the spring.
So our plan, if we get this now, is there will be a deadline for folks to apply internally of the end of June, because the fall, or the spring deadline to apply for Northampton Community College is August or September. So we want to make sure we have enough time to get all the pieces in place.
And also, would there be a way to review their academic standing prior to their admission so that, I guess, you assess their
Absolutely.
readiness to enter without any extra courses or
Part of the
prereqs?
Yeah, part of the application is to submit their undergrad transcript showing their prerequisites.
And the policy laid out pretty specifically the sort of the prerequisites, not coursework-wise, but attendance and also, yes, the grades for the either high school or the undergrad prerequisites, because the nursing programs are so competitive, especially at NAC, because it's such a good value, that we have to be, I think, exceptionally selective of the 5 folks we even consider, because they may not get into the program just because we accept them. So that's a piece of it too.
Go ahead.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
And I'm not on the committee, I just have a question.
Sure.
You have to monitor the grade progress of these people, because there's a potential for them to get less than is required.
Absolutely.
And then they would be bounced out of the program.
Correct.
Who oversight, who has oversight?
So HR is going to ultimately, at this point, oversee it. At some point down the line, the assistant administrator of Graysdale, which at the moment is Jennifer Stewart King, would help oversee that, but she has enough on her plate at the moment. But the policy outlines that in order for us to pay, they have to earn a B or higher. And when we met with NAC, they have a deferred payment program where the student takes the class, they have their transcript. If they have an A or a B, we pay the bill. If they don't, the student has to pay the bill. So that's all part of the policy as well. You're welcome. And I think in the past when they had this program, there was some issue with monitoring that, as well as folks who then dropped a class too late, and so they retook it, and so we were, not we, but our predecessors were paying for the same class twice, and so that's addressed in the policy as well. So it will definitely require a fair amount of oversight.
Any other questions? I have a question. Have you gauged interest internally? Do you feel you have a pretty good
Absolutely.
group of people who want to apply at least?
Significant. I think just in my meetings with folks, I have brought it up as a topic that we were working on and establishing the policies, and it has been very well received, and I think folks are really looking forward to it. Now, how many of the folks will meet the attendance requirement remains to be seen, but my hope is that it maybe has some positive improvement on call-outs for folks who are, obviously, at least for folks who are interested in applying.
And since we're doing personnel and you're here, with Graysdale, I mean, how is it with the RN, LPN? I mean, where we stand right now? Any thought, ideas? I mean, I know we've always struggled to keep,
Sure.
especially RNs.
Right.
But I was wondering if
And
you could.
I think we can better address that tomorrow
All right.
in the Human Services
All right.
Committee.
Oh, yeah.
We are making progress.
I don't want to step on Ms. Hefner's
No,
toes.
that's okay. We are making progress. But more is to be.
Okay, great. That'd be good. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, do I have a motion to move this forward?
So moved.
A second? And so it is moved.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Okay. Was dragging my feet a little bit because I know Mr. McGee would probably be walking in any minute. But we can move on. We can move on. So I guess the next thing we have is discussion regarding the afscme memorandum of understanding regarding shift differential pay. Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed thing? And I know we have.
Sure. I was going to say just briefly that this is a proposed memorandum of agreement between the county and the afscme local at Graysdale to pay the LPNs and CNAs on the second and third shifts an additional 15 cents per hour in shift differential, because we have examined the staffing at Graysdale and found that it is the second shift in particular that tends to be the most lacking in people. But the third shift also could end up losing if we incentivized only the second shift. So although this is not a whole lot of money, we're hoping that it will be enough to push people over, because it will now be $1 an hour extra they get to work the second and third shifts instead of 85 cents.
Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I don't generally have a problem with this, except for the fact that this contract expires at the end of this year. So I guess my question is, why did we have to do this now when presumably this could be negotiated as part of the next contract?
A good question, and understood. We asked that ourselves. Apparently the problem is acute now on the second shift. And if it weren't for the need for more personnel on that shift in particular, we probably would wait until we could negotiate. And that's also why we're only inclined to do 15 cents at this time, when, as we look at it, we may find that, you probably don't want to hear this, but we may find that it needs to be a bigger differential.
Right. Can you, and this again may bleed into tomorrow's meeting, but do you feel that the gap is because of scheduling, or is it call-outs, or in that particular shift?
It seems that the staff that we have now seems to prefer either a day shift or an overnight shift in terms of scheduling the rest of their life activities around, which to me says we don't have a very young workforce. Because I think if we had more young people, they might prefer that second shift. Because if you think about it, you can wake up late, work till 11, still have plenty of time to go out and tear the town up. And we are working on recruiting more young people.
That middle shift is, if you do have some kind of organized life, the middle shift is always a rough go. But
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Lori, do you still have anything you want to do? Anybody? Go ahead.
Just, I mean, this appears to be strictly a wage increase. Were there any concessions offered as part of this? I don't think I see anything as far as this just appears to be a straight. Again, I think this is warranted, but I'm a little weary about, we do have an agreement till the end of the year, and I don't see any sort of concessions for the increase at this time. Usually there's some give and take here, and all I see is give.
You're right. And the normal trade-off for money on the labor side is labor. They will give us labor. Well, right now we're a little short of their labor. So we're really hoping that the additional money will get us additional labor, whether it's in the form of not calling out as much because now it rounds up to a whole extra $1, and if they work more than 40 hours a week, $1.50. It's really to remedy the shortage of labor, so the trade-off is still money for labor. But you're right. You point out, you look at it this way, it's a trade-off of money for labor only, which is our normal bargain.
Did you have some?
I'm just curious, besides money, are there any other incentives talked about?
I would have to defer to the Human Services group for that because Sue is coming over now, and I was going to say I'm not sure Sue is the only one, but.
Well, the reason I asked the question, it's not it's just that you can work all these hours and you pay people extra money, but it's still tired, you're still working. All these people are doing a lot of overtime. Maybe there was something that they looked for that would have been more of an incentive to get this.
A little bit.
Okay.
But you can answer some of it too. At the end of the day, we agree. I mean, it is absolutely not just about money, and the folks there, for the most part, at least off the record, would say that as well. So there's a couple of dynamics happening, which we are working on addressing, related to mandation. Is that a word, mandation?
It is now.
Mandating people to work, and how that process works. And so, well, Liz can speak to that. I mean, I know the outcome of that, but we're working on resolving how folks are currently mandated, so that they have a little more control in the process. And we made, I think, very good headway with just a general meeting with some of the union staff and HR. The other piece, which I'm in the process of exploring, is unit bumping, which is you have somebody who works during the daytime shift and they either voluntarily agree or they are mandated to stay, and there's this odd thing that happens where they can bump a less senior person off of their shift or off of their floor or their unit, and apparently that is also causing a lot of aggravation. So that I only learned, I think, on Thursday or Friday last week. So I'm working on that with Jennifer Stewart King, and actually I had a nice conversation with two of the union folks who I just happened to be in a meeting with about it. So there are things besides just the money. I think people the biggest thing that I think folks are getting from this at Graysdale is that we are listening and we are trying. And so 15 cents, maybe to most people, is negligible, but I think it is being seen as we are trying to make it better for them and bring in more folks, more qualified folks, to improve the morale and make sure that we are providing good quality patient care.
Mr. McGee is in charge.
My apologies for my late arrival. I got into some traffic issues. Thank you, Mr. Heckman, for helping out.
Always a pleasure. I have a question.
Sure.
I know it's been a rough ride for the folks at Graysdale, and we don't need to go through history. Do you sense with this, and referencing what was asked of you earlier, I have no problem with doing this for this year, but you are going to then be starting to negotiate already.
Right.
And do you have it? Well, I don't want to, that would influence. Do you see a couple things, I guess. One, I guess we could use this as a springboard to the next one if we say, look, we'll do this now, and we're hoping as a sign of good faith that when we sit at the table for the big contract, you'll see that we are serious about looking at the concerns that you have out at Graysdale. And two, as you were talking, did you note any residual anger or resentment on the part of AFSCME in terms of the give back? What went on over the past few years? I mean, are they? Did you notice any of that, or they want to start on a new foot and move forward?
I have to say that I didn't, but
Okay.
when I approached the AFSCME representative with this, we really only talked about the one topic
I
and
understand.
explained to her what our real concern was, that second shift and the number of call-outs we got, and just wanted to say, like, it's part of it is, as Sue said, a way to send a message to the workforce. We know where your problems are, and the other part of it is we want to fix them, and this is one thing we can do that we're pretty sure will be part of the long-term solution, maybe not all of it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess that's my. I was just curious because I think sometimes, and I always found AFSCME to be very agreeable in working. I never had a problem working with AFSCME, but now you have AFSCME and you have the Steelworkers Union. I would take it out.
That's true.
I remember when they first came on, just based on history and what's been happening, that they see that council now, I guess along with the administration, is committed to moving forward, and that we might not be able to do everything right away, but I think we're joined in a process to hopefully make things work for everybody involved. That's all. That's just my own opinion.
Right. No, I'm glad to hear your own opinion.
Well, I just pass it on. Thank you.
Okay. Anything?
Any other questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do we do a motion to move it on? We just. Oh, do you do a motion to move it forward?
Sure. Can we ask for a motion from one of the committee members to move this forward for tomorrow?
So moved.
Second.
Well, Ms. Hefner, Mr. Heckman? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. I guess that's it. Adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
Well, technically there's no break, but I just got a new nose spray from my doctor, a new prescription, and I don't know what's in it, but I need
Motion to
get
take a break, please.
a little bit. I'd like to have that for like 60 seconds because I think this nose spray was made in a southern hemisphere country.
Of any unidentified substances. And, as soon as I sat down, my dad, so I had another heart attack.
that we're missing to make sure people, I know second shift employees are paid most people. It's not, and it's not only that. The question is, you know, do they need break time? Do they need extra hours somewhere? Do they need?
Okay. Who's on this committee? Myself? Matt is on this committee.
Tara, no, Matt's not on it.
Oh.
Bob, John, you, and Tara.
Oh, okay. Not cool. Animal crackers. Did you just get those? I didn't know we had those.
Sharon bought it.
Oh, good. Well, thank her. All right. Let's see. Where's my agenda for this?
Right here.
Oh, okay, good.
I didn't put notes.
What's that?
I didn't put
Oh, that's fine. I just. I'll tell you what, though, they help.
Everybody has to adjust their chairs.
Oh, these new chairs?
Yeah, they're watching them. They fly. The back goes back a little too far.
Oh, okay.
Is there a way to tighten the back on this?
Yeah, but I don't
Oh,
know.
all right. Well, we'll get that.
Got it?
All right. I guess what we're going to do is bring the Finance Committee meeting to order. Nobody's listening to me. I feel like I'm at home.
Look how tall I am now.
Good for you. All right. The meeting of the Finance Committee meeting will be called to order. And let's see, what are we doing here? Finance. Courtesy of the floor. Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to address the Finance Committee meeting? Or any of this? All right, having no one, seeing no one, we're going to do a review of District Court Lease, Court Number 3-2-10. That would be Judge Matos Gonzalez. Let's see. Is anyone here? Joe's not here. Mr. Durden, I know it's. I guess you could get up and talk about it.
Services Director.
Certainly. I think everyone was aware that Judge Matos Gonzalez was kind of stuck up in that situation where Bethlehem had changed the rules as to where they're allowed to have district courts, and at the same time, the previous landlord that we had contracted with had, owed the county, the city of Bethlehem, and the school district $310,000 in back taxes, so they were not getting permits to move forward on what they were doing. And Judge Matos Gonzalez was kind of left in the lurch as her lease was expiring the end of this month. There was a mad scramble on the part of court administration and administration for the county to try and find another spot. We were very fortunate with a little bit of partnership from Alicia Connor in Bethlehem and the mayor to find another place, which this is. Judge Matos Gonzalez has one of the smallest, most compact districts in Northampton County, so we really have essentially like a 1 square mile area and very little real estate to work with. We were very fortunate to find this particular spot, and the courts as well as us were able to find something, negotiate a positive contract, and keep the prices down to near current costs.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Mr. Goosey?
Yeah, just my concern is the length of the lease. It's 20 years. Is that typical that we've always done that?
No, absolutely not. Actually, it's the opposite in this case. It was not the landlord that wanted that. It was the experience that we were having not being able to find anything, and the recognition that we are on the positive side on the lease price for this compared to what other entities are paying in this region, and not wanting to be in a scramble for an area that doesn't have much already, and being in the shadow of St. Luke's over there. There is another entity that's, we're in constant competition with, so it was in our best interest, it was in the county's best interest to go longer on the lease. This was not something that the landlord was asking for in the beginning, we kind of moved forward on that to make sure that we would have a space there.
Anything else? I see, 2038. I'm going to be an old man then.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I see that we, at the beginning of the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, will be adjusted as follows. Do you have any idea on, I know we're using the consumer price, but are we, and I know what you just said, and I
Right.
appreciate that, and I don't know if this even is necessary, but I'm just wondering how locked we are. I mean, we don't know what that's going to be or how that's going to go, and if the county
No, but
has any flexibility.
As with all county leases, we do have, there are exits available for us, so it's not something that we are, lock solid in. In the future, there may be mergers of MDJs, so if that becomes the case, we have an out in that regard.
Yeah, and this
There's
is not
something-
for you. I guess we'd have to wait for Jerome, but I mean, I know that was always a topic, and the sitting judge who was at the time for the district magistrates, they would talk about how maybe we'd be looking at that for years.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Any questions? Any more questions for Mr. Derringer? All right. Thank you. I guess. Oh,
Motion to recommend approval tomorrow night.
okay. Well, we're the three of us. I agree. So we'll move that on to tomorrow night. Recommend it. All right. Discussion regarding the general purpose authority, the St. Luke's Hospital project. Who is here for that? Yes, sir. If you could give your name and affiliation.
I'm Dave Hughes from the Department of Community and Economic Development. I'd like to request through the GPA council approval for a health, safety, and welfare resolution to help support a $200 million project that the hospital will be doing. Of that $200 million, $100 million will be for new projects on various campuses throughout the area that they service, and the other $100 million will be for a refinance of existing debt. This will be it'll be a conduit debt through the GPA. There'll be no liability to the county or to the GPA. Total liability is in the hands of St. Luke's.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hughes as long as he's up here at the podium? Yes. Do you have a point?
Yeah, just you mentioned the refinancing. As you know, interest rates have been slowly heading upward. What is the current interest rate that they have on the bonds they're refinancing, and what do they hope to
The refinancing that they're doing is $100 million, which they had just done in December. They did it in December. They kind of rushed it through because there was concern that it was going to be a tax change in the law that would have an impact on their tax-free status. So when they did this, they had made it in the agreement that they were going to remarket in the beginning of 2018. The original pricing was a variable rate. They want to flip it to a fixed rate, and that's what they're going to be doing.
Well, that makes sense. Then otherwise, this is what the GPA was supposed to do. It was supposed to take the place of the hospital authority, the education authority, and I intend to support this as well.
Thank you.
So
We have been supporters of this over the years. I think it's a good cause, and it's worthwhile.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, whatever the future may hold, I mean, that was always my understanding, especially talking to folks from back in the day, that this was the point of the GPA in many ways. Despite what the future may hold, I have no problem with
And
this
very
myself.
honestly, what the GPA does, they'll get like 20 basis points on the $100 million, which is new money.
Yeah.
And what they do is they actually take that money and put it out to a lot of charitable organizations and grants.
Yeah. All right, well, then I guess I'll ask if we have does any other questions do we have a motion to move it on?
motion to recommend
Mr.
approval.
Kusick, Mr. Warner. All right, so moved.
Thank you very
Tomorrow
much.
night. Thank you. Okay, discussion regarding the proposed changes to the administrative code.
No, we have
never,
contract.
never mind. My mistake. Now and then I make. Okay, discussion regarding an Article 13 contract, Conduit State and Local Solutions. Mr. Barron, I guess, will be speaking to this.
I absolutely will speak to this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. This is part of the county's technology refresh program. It is in the capital improvements budget. When we contracted a few years ago with Conduit, Xerox, now Conduit, formerly ACS, and every other incarnation they've been, we use this to refresh and replace so that we get similar equipment that is easily configurable to our network. The switches and network switches they're putting in are at the end of life. We clearly don't want to be in a situation where one of those or multiple of them go down, considering the level of data that we have, some of it stored for state entities, and to keep up with the security of our computer network. Therefore, this is in the budget, and it's part of our regular refresh program.
Could you just refresh? I don't have the budget in front of me. What was the number we had budgeted, and this did it come in under?
It's about the same because it's a total pooled budget for the technology, but it's what was expected in the refresh. So it's part of the original capital plan that was approved with the 2018 budget.
Okay.
I haven't looked at the specific expenses in a long while because a lot of that is pooled. You wouldn't find it in there. You'll find it in the big book if you're looking for specific detail for that item.
Okay. I know it's budgeted.
It is budgeted.
I just want to get it.
Yeah, I see it. Computer refresh, server refresh, yeah. Switch refresh, 382.
Yeah, we're at, for this one, it's 375,
So
942,
we're
41.
actually under
We're
budget
under,
then.
we're under budget.
That's good.
I didn't know if you had what detail, level of detail was in. There are many books running around in reports, so. Okay. Sorry.
I suggest we move this forward to council.
I would second that.
All right, a motion and a second, and we'll be moving that on. Thank you, Mr. Barron. I guess you're going to stand there because we're now going to move to the discussion of, did you have something else you want to say on that?
Not on that. I wanted to share a bit of information with council with regard to the external auditors, if I may.
Oh, good.
It wasn't on the agenda, but I wanted to let you know the financial statements are going to be a little bit late this year. Nothing that the county could control. I will explain. You got a bill from the external auditors for an additional $3,500. Mary Alice, Duran, myself, Bryce Myers, all the folks involved with the P3 project have been working very, very diligently to make sure that we report this new entity correctly. What we settled on was a blended component fund, which what that means is now we actually bring the financials of the GPA into the financial statement. For those of you who are familiar with the county budget, we're basically treating it as a special revenue fund. Okay? Since we do that, we had to do a lot of data needed to be brought in, and Riley and Company, who does the external audit for the GPA, got us their financials Friday the 13th, which was 2 weeks later than they had done so previously because of these changes. We were supposed to have everything done and to RKL by the 16th, and there was no way those statements could get built out. So at this point, we're not looking at much into May. We're looking in early May, but the deadline is April 30th, so I wanted to alert you to that. On the good news, though, the Controller's office was finished on time and a little bit early, actually. The auditors cut their stay with us short a week because they were done and had no more work to do. So our process was incredibly efficient, and we were ready to go. We just had to wait for those statements, which we didn't get. And it's not Riley and Company's fault, to be clear, either. This is the way this new P3 has been put together, makes it very, very difficult from an accounting standpoint because assets traded hands, namely bridges, to the GPA, which now is owned by with Krieger, and we're paying Krieger along with other agreements, and there's a lot of money flying around, and we want to make sure we do it right.
Yes, go ahead.
Steve, are we going to get hit with any penalties for this?
There is a home rule charter requirement, April 30th. The only thing right now is the extra $3,500 from RKL. RKL has not said they're going to bill us any additional money. The only requirement that's out there is the home rule charter requirement, and I'm not offended by that so long as you aren't. I just wanted to keep you in the know. I know Mr. Cusick asked for financial statements, quarterly statements, on the dates that they're due, and I'm presupposing that question, and I didn't want you to be surprised and wanted to tell you the reason why right now. Mary Alice is working diligently. It does hold up the CFA a little bit, but we won't be late in filing our CFA, so we should be okay.
Any other questions on this topic? All right. Well, I guess then thank you, and we'll move on to the discussion regarding the proposed changes to the administrative code.
I do have one question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Moving forward, do you foresee more of this, the lateness coming into other reports in the future? I mean, I guess you can't predict, but, you know, if it's already a roadblock and some red tape.
I don't predict it. I think a lot of the growing pains this year was the fact that the project is underway. The milestone payments have been made, and the 2017 budget that we're auditing right now in 2018 was the first time that this program was in full effect, where construction happened and performance was being undertaken under the contract. So since that was the case, my thought is that early growing pain is just how we were going to handle it, and once we bring all those components in and know what numbers we need, it's very easy to now pull them in and plug them into where they go in the financial statement. So it's going to be a longer process because it is an additional special revenue fund, but I don't see it, especially now that Riley and Company know. But we may want to look at that and see where Riley and Company is going to be next year, and take it from
At
there.
least so we make our deadlines.
Correct.
Thank
yes.
you.
Can I follow up on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
Steve, there's some questions about the legal fees related to the P3 project that you referenced. Will this be part of the audit that we get from Riley? Will they be taking a look at that?
Riley and Company just do the financials of the General Purpose Authority. Those bills are stated in there. Remember, this is 2017, so you'll see all those costs down and dirty. So they won't have any interpretation of anything, though, because those costs, at least for 2017 and the development of the P3, they were high, but they were talked about in their public meetings and stuff like that. So Riley and Company is aware of them. It's not really a public policy-driven thing. It's more of this is the numbers down and dirty.
All right. Well, then I guess if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the Article 13, procurement and disposition of county property. Mr. Barron.
So Article 13 has been a bone of contention for a while, as many other things in the administrative code. I'm working on other areas of the administrative code now as we speak. There are very, very few changes and most of the sections have no changes. However, Article 13 needed the most work. So with Tony Sabino from the Controller's Office, myself, Andrew Elliott, who is my administrative assistant, Kathy Anderson, Terry Beidelman from Procurement, we put this together with these changes for you. And I'll go over each of the changes in as much detail as you'd like. Kathy Anderson is here from Procurement if I can't answer a question for you. I don't know how you want me to proceed. I guess start and go through. Okay. So,
Take us through each of the changes if you could, and why they were made. And
I agree. Good plan.
So starting on Section 1302 definitions. We do not keep a bidders list anymore. We haven't done so for a while. So since we don't do something that's in the code, it probably should not be there. So we removed it. We also removed bidders list in other references. The remainder of the changes, I believe, in definitions until we get to the new G, which used to be H.
Can I interrupt? And this will be fine if anybody wants to as we move along. I know we haven't done it, and I don't have a problem with getting rid of something we don't do, the bidders list. But what was the original intent of the bidders list, and were we making a mistake not abiding by it?
That's not how goods and services are procured anymore. It was an old way of keeping a list and keeping qualified bidders on retainer, so to speak. Right now, with modern technology, and I think Kathy could attest to this, right now what we do is we put out a bid on the computer system, on the public purchasing platform, and if somebody is qualified, that's our bidders list. If you're registered on that public purchasing platform, it's kept on that internal system, and then they can bid on work they're qualified to bid on, or at least patently, up front qualified to bid on. We do review them internally after they bid. Is that the best way to?
Well, and this is the nuts and bolts of what we do,
mail
so
out the
it's
bids from
teachable.
the procurement office, a lot of duplication,
Yeah.
a lot of, postage costs, and we would keep a list of the bidders who were interested in participating. We now use an online bidding platform called Public Purchase, and the onus is on them to register. They pick a classification. I also pick classifications when I release a bid, and it marries up, so they're automatically notified.
Okay. Yeah, I have no problem. I just want to, as we go through some of these things, I think it's teachable moments of past and present. So go ahead, Mr. Perrin.
So now the other changes are actually the renumbering of the section until you get to the old H, current G in the proposal, which is non-competitive negotiation. Part of my time in the controller's office was determining what is single source, what is sole source, what does that all mean, because it's not clearly defined. So in the new Article 13, sole source does not exist. It is only from one source or a single source, and letting the county executive justify to council why it is a single source and have that to be part of a debate for public policy. Sole source calls in a whole lot of other questions, and a lot of our purchasing that was done via sole source actually was justified as if it was from a single source anyway. So it takes the subjectivity out of it. We also say see Section 1310, which we'll get to later on, for clarification of when this method is appropriate to use. Non-competitive negotiation is actually defined under another section, so we're just referencing that section where it is further defined. When we get to 1310, I'll explain that more, okay? Because what ultimately happened is we looked to be more competitive, okay? Which I think is important to get the best value for the county tax dollar, as well as to give confidence to county council that the executive is really engaging to get the best value. Renumbering all the way down to professional services, which was another issue, and famously an issue that I sued over with regard to Sol Communications when I was controller. So we looked to define professional services much more clearly because at the time my solicitor was like, this definition is terrible. So we rewrote the definition a little bit to add the bold. We didn't take anything out because the beginning was pretty good. But we say if a license or certification is part of the evaluation process for the service sought by the county, the service is defined as a professional services for the purposes of the Northampton County Administrative Code. So we are not anointing anybody as a professional service, but if we are seeking some sort of certification or qualification, they are now by default considered a professional service. Does that make sense? It's clearing up the definition. Renumbering all the rest of the way through then the definitions. Any questions about the definitions section? Okay. So 13.3 and 13.4 remain unchanged. 1304 is changed other than C. And basically this just now incorporates the code into what we actually do. In the past, the procurement office encumbered the funds. Now the department making the acquisition encumbers the funds. It's practically what we do, so therefore I wanted to make sure that the code matched what our practice was, and it's currently best practice. That was the reason for the change there. Moving along then to 1305, 1306 is not changed. 1307, we took out number 4 under the source selection methods. We do not make small purchase procedures anymore. We actually have a process in our internal policies and procedures manual. That process is clearly documented, and we go through phone quotes, and we just do not do the small purchases anymore.
Okay.
And we utilize the P card. That is correct.
So no more giving away gift cards?
We still have 38. Any takers? Sorry.
Well, it's close to that. There's 38.
There is 38.
And we found them as well.
Yes.
You may want to at least clarify then, now that you've mentioned there are 38, what's happening.
The gift cards were purchased by the last administration. Right now, for incentive programs and whatever through the Wellness Committee, we've talked about some of those, like how we can divest ourselves of these gift cards. The Health and Wellness Committee would like some say over that because they were purchased with health and wellness dollars. So we're working with HR to do that.
Who has actual possession of them, and what lockbox are they in now? Under whose control? The executives, or yours, or Mr. Dertinger? Or?
No, I don't trust myself with gift cards. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just wondering who has them.
No, they're in the HR office. The
Okay.
Deputy Director, Kathleen McNeil, has them in her drawer. I counted them in her office the other day, just so we
Okay.
knew how many.
All right.
So.
Good. Any other questions? We can move on.
Okay. And then, of course, the renumbering the selection. Property was confusing, procurement of county property over $25,000. Property invokes some other things. It can
Buildings
be
and
confusing,
land.
yeah. So goods and services is a little bit clearer way to say that. Shall be by the methods outlined under 1307A, which is listed here. We basically just scratched out the listing of them because it was kind of redundant and confusing. Unless prior solicitation of any contract, the county executive shall, with the approval of county council, determine these methods are not practical. There may be a reason that these five methods are not practicable, and then with the approval of council, if we tell you why they're not practical, we would look to procure goods and services in another way. Any questions about that? Okay, 1308, competitive sealed bidding. We have other platforms for public notice. So what we did is invitation for bids proposals shall be given adequate public notice to include one or more of the following. Number 1 was taken out because at least one newspaper. We use other platforms right now to do that, and my famous argument is you hide things in newspapers now. You don't publicly express them. So we struck number 1. There are 3 other methods, and all of those we currently do right now. We don't have any publication costs, so publication costs, copies of invitations for bids. We don't do invitations. We don't have costs. That's just not applicable anymore. So E has been stricken, or C has been stricken. And actually, I missed that. So C, the D for bid opening, and E should be changed to C and D accordingly. We also said now, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I understand everything's done electronically now. Was there any thought or consideration or that possibly some vendor or somebody for a smaller contract may actually, I don't know, using the newspaper? I mean, I know they're all online now too, but was the idea that, in fact, I get it, we save a lot, I understand, in publication costs, but was there any concerns whatsoever regarding not putting it in print?
I didn't have any, Kathy. No.
The office didn't? Okay, fine. Just question. An old-fashioned question.
That's okay. Moving down to award. The contract shall be awarded within 90 days after the bid opening by written notice to the response. We added 30 days, and that's primarily for when council goes on hiatus. So in December, if you don't meet for a lengthy period of time, we can't get something on the agenda, has to be voted on by council. This gives us more time to do that. And as opposed to, having to cancel a bid under the administrative code and go out to rebid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, yell at me if I'm ahead of myself. We still have the trigger for removing someone we don't want for 30.
Absolutely. It's in our contractual language.
Okay.
Yeah.
To award the contract, and when this comes into play, typically with an invitation to bid, we don't need council approval. The only time we need council approval for an invitation to bid is if it comes from a source other than the general fund, a grant. And depending on when the bid opens, it could be missed that month's council meeting, and then we have to wait, to get it to you. And then in case of the Louise Moore Park, we tabled it, and then we had to reject all bids in the best interest of yours, because we couldn't make the 60-day deadline. So that was the only reason.
Gives everybody more time and not have to reject a bid out of hand. And then we just actually, the other strikeout is now moving, as we move language around and cut things out. 1316C1 is now 1315C1, just for clerical. So 1309 is for competitive negotiation. The one change is procurement office shall notify council when the request for proposal is released. The extra 30-day notice to council, waiting 30 days to then trigger the request for proposal, really slowed down the process, specifically if we wanted to competitively bid something, but we were sort of in a hurry to get the services. Council, obviously, for things over $100,000 can still put the brakes on. You still have plenty of time because a request for competitive negotiation is on the street for at least 30 days. So council will probably meet in that time period. So if you see something you want to ask a question about, you'll still have the opportunity to do that. But this just speeds up the process a little bit and is more practicable. We took out all professional services shall be selected using this method because clearly there are professional services that fall under other categories. For example, legal services. So the language here was very, very restrictive when in the rest of the administrative code it is not. So therefore we just struck that out of the code, because it's in conflict in a whole bunch of other places. Does that make sense? So under B, evaluation factors, including price and other criteria, be determined and documented by the evaluation committee. The request for proposal shall be we cut out a lot of the indication, the relative importance of price and other factors. The evaluation factors should actually be determined and documented by the evaluation committee, not just the procurement officer and the ordering department. So if there is an evaluation committee selected, I think it's in the best interest that that committee come up with what criteria. Clearly they would have some level of expertise. If it was only the procurement officer and the ordering department, should council choose to be involved in a process, they wouldn't get a say over the criteria or evaluation either. I know a lot of times council is invited to these processes, so you would want a stake in that as well. right? So this just kind of opens that up for county council to also, express their wishes on criteria when evaluating these competitive RFPs. So there are no other changes other than a citation under the competitive process, which leads us to 1310, non-competitive negotiation. So we took out sole supplier and used single supplier using a non-competitive negotiation process when the county executive or her designee determines that it is not practical or prudent to use other than the required or designated supply, service, or item. Prior to the award of the contract, the county executive shall, in accordance with 1307B, issue an executive order and for the specific reasons of using non-competitive negotiation. We restate this again and saying this method should not be used to substitute for a competitive procedure if a competitive procedure can reasonably be used. So it's not to substitute. The county executive, before coming to council, if it's required, or goes to this method and writes an executive order, should have a compelling reason and should outline that in an executive order. Small purchases, where it's not expected to exceed the aggregated amount. We don't do contracts specifically for anything under $25,000. We don't do those small purchases anymore, so it was just stricken from the code, which means everything else is changed below, simply just for numbering purposes. Emergency procurement, there's really not been much of a problem with that. Cooperative purchasing. The controller's office had some concerns when we audited Article 13 about whether or not we're getting the best price when we do competitive or these cooperative purchasing agreements.
So like co-stars, and
Co-stars
state
and
contracts.
yeah. What was that?
You don't recognize co-stars because that's not bid.
Yeah. What?
We use the true Pennsylvania state contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the purchasing office we put in here will use due diligence to assure the best price when relying on this method of procurement. And they document it. We do that now, but we're actually putting in the administrative code what we do. Okay, so then that way we can hold future purchasing managers to that standard. The procurement office may purchase from a vendor under a cooperative purchasing agreement contract only if the procurement officer determines and documents that the purchase is in the best interest of the county. So we wanted to go further and say make sure we document that it's in the best interest of the county. And that was all changes from there. Any questions about that? Okay. There aren't any major changes other than the new 1315. All executed contracts and agreements shall be filed in the procurement division within 14 days after the execution and shall immediately be available for the inspection of any member of county council, and I put in or the county controller because I think it should be inspectable, and I was told no a lot for the last 4 years. So
That's a no-brainer.
okay, sorry. Under 1315C, at least 5 days before county executive obligates the county to propose terms of any prospective contract, we provide written notification. Unless it exceeds the $100,000 mark, that stays the same. Yes. Yeah. You want to explain that, Kathy?
Mm-hmm.
That was a procurement suggested change, so.
Yeah, typically we do the executive order, and you're given a copy of that before we send out the contract, and then it usually takes 2 weeks to get it back, depending if there's bonding and insurance requirements. So it's really not a big deal, but there are times when we have an emergency or something that we need to do immediately, and then we would have to sit and wait for the 20 days.
Okay.
Or else be out of violation of the code, which we've been.
No, go ahead. All right.
So it's at least 5 days.
Yeah.
Could be more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Just one clarification. Thank you.
Now, the big change is the addition to this of number 3. And this is specifically the Nazareth ambulance situation, which we're all familiar with. So one of the big issues was that if council failed to approve a contract over $100,000, what do we do? There were threats of lawsuits. We rebid. They maneuvered things around. Changing the administrative code and Article 13 without moving anybody's powers around that are granted under the Home Rule Charter is very tricky. The only person who can sign a contract and bind the county to a contract is the county executive. But council has this approval power of over $100,000. So the committee worked really hard, racked our brains, talked a lot about this. We went through several drafts of this specific language, and this is what we came up with. If council fails to approve a contract over $100,000, the county executive can contract for services where public safety or the health and safety of Northampton County residents would be jeopardized. The contract should be continued for no longer than 6 months with the incumbent vendor, if there is one, and the vendor is willing to provide the services, or an alternative vendor if the incumbent is not able to perform the duties. Okay? That's in essence what we had happen with Nazareth Ambulance. It gives county executive and the county council 6 months to come to a resolve. And at that point, if there's still an impasse that needs a court to decide, maybe that is what should happen. But I can't remove all litigation from legislation or a code like this. I think this is the best case scenario or the best situation. And I used specifically the Nazareth ambulance situation because I think that most reasonable people would agree that the county executive at the time, it was John Stofa, would have been given the opportunity to still provide for the county residents the ability to get to and from their appointments at Graysdale. Any questions about that?
Do you have any questions?
You know, this was the one piece of this whole thing that kind of.
I had a feeling there'd be a question somewhere in here.
Because I think it opens up the door for, whenever we disagree, for the county executive to turn around and say, well, I think it's a matter of public health and safety, so.
I do understand that, and, they're not to presuppose what council could do, because your solicitor could help you with that, obviously, but there are ways to, stop the county executive or get an injunctive action of some sort. I know that's sticky, nasty, and getting 5 votes or 6 votes or whatever you would need to do that would not be easy to do at times. But based on the inherent powers given in the Home Rule Charter, I think this is a good compromise to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember the situation too. I think this is a reasonable way to approach problems that occur like this, rather than because it gets caught up in personal and all kinds of arguments back and forth. I think you have to still come to the agreement that it has to be best for the community. And what we did do, in doing this, I think, is you're looking out for the best interest of continuing the service, which is what we're supposed to do, and maintaining the time to review the circumstances. And I think it's a reasonable ask.
The other thing that jumped into my mind was, especially since we're absorbing Bethlehem's 911 center, clearly 911 services would also fall under this. And if there was a disagreement, we wouldn't want to put the entire county's 911 services at risk either. So I wanted to be broad enough to include other situations, but not so limited that we would be constantly still at war, the executive branch and the legislative branch.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand why you're doing it, and I mean, I think there'll always be probably arguments ever since we initiated Home Rule Charter. The branches are going to tussle. The only branch that seems to not have to worry about tussling is the judicial. They just float in. I see why. I understand. I mean, the executive branch is charged with making sure things work day to day, and if there's a problem. When we got rid of the emergency fund, that whole word emergency. So, I'm a little bit of, when we use certain words, I get a little itchy, but I understand. I get the intent, and I know the executive, having been a councilman and certainly the director of administration, why some of these things were put in over the years, because sometimes there were executives who they tended to want to battle a little harder back and forth with who should do what. But I mean, overall, I see what your intent is here, and I have no problem with trying it out, see how it works. I mean, I don't know. Anybody else have anything they want to do on this point?
I don't know. 6 months seems like a mighty long time.
Maybe it goes quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I read this. There were a couple points in this that I could scratch in my head, and this was one of them, John. But I guess on this one, I was willing to lean towards, okay, you know, I mean, I think and I brought this up in the past, council's power or authority is up to council, and, you know, we have to be willing to step up and flex. I mean, I don't have a problem with it, because if for some reason, let's say if there's one vendor that is willing to provide the service, or an alternate if they're not able to perform the duties. Now, if an alternate came in at the 4-month period on the clock, they would have 2 months left. They wouldn't get an automatic new 6.
Correct.
See, I always think like a sneaky executive. So in other words, the 6 month, for whatever it is the 6 month, regardless of who's doing it.
That is my that is what I intended to write.
Yeah. I'm sure that was the intent of the executive branch.
I actually never even thought of that. That's really good. So,
well, I mean, okay. I guess we could.
Yeah.
Depending on the service.
Yeah.
Depending on the service, because it could be any service for the county.
Well, I'm going to work as a council member. I have no problem with it, but I'm going to be working on the assumption that if the executive has to have a contract for services where public safety or health is involved, that's somewhat of a very critical situation, and that between all of us, we should get that worked out over 6 months. So that my position is I'll let you know right now that whatever that service was is 6 months, regardless of how many people may have had to come in or out to perform it. But that's how I'm reading it going forward. Anybody?
Any other questions
No.
about that? Oh, okay. So then, moving forward, it's, I guess, page 1323. It would be G3. There was a provision under here, then it's still intact largely. The County of Northampton shall not make contractual agreements with a vendor who is delinquent on any taxes due to the county until the taxes are paid in full. Delinquent shall herein be defined as the point when the taxes owed become the responsibility of the Tax Claims Bureau to collect. So if brought to the attention of procurement or any agent of Northampton County, there have been times where contracts have been entered into. I know of one that I've already dealt with, and it wasn't brought to our attention, but the contract was entered into. Now, we do have remedies to levy and not pay for the services and apply those services to the person's delinquent taxes, which I think is a good thing. But we might not know that a person is delinquent when we enter into it, because people have LLCs and all different kinds of entities that they buy property under. So if brought to the attention of procurement or any other agent of Northampton County, I think if it's brought to our attention, we should act upon it. That doesn't mean that we should presuppose, council then can't say, oh, you should have known, and, the executive, can't say to council if they choose to enter into some sort of contract that they should have known, like for external auditing services or whatever.
Well, we may still say you should have known.
They may, but so.
Go ahead.
The rest are really just changes to numbers and citations until we get to the old 1318, which is now 1317. For simplicity's sake, the disposition of county property other than real estate, we struck the whole section. And we added the new language that was written by Terry Beidelman. Why, you might say, did we do that? Well, because we weren't following 13, 18 at all, because that was not a practicable way to dispose of county property. So therefore, we rewrote it to show what we do to dispose of county property. And now, if this is approved by council, we will be compliant, and it'd actually match what we do. The long and short of it. So I did not write this. The committee did not write this. Terry sent it to all of us in the group after our, I think, first meeting and said, would you consider dropping this in there? And it matched what they do based on their policies and procedures in the office. So therefore, unedited, we put it right in there.
Okay. Anybody have anything? Apparently not.
Then there are no, other than numbering changes, there were no other changes until, I believe there was one more. Maybe there wasn't. No, I think that's it. Other than numbering changes.
Yeah. Since we're on this topic, I just want to bring this up. As I went through this, I got it last week from Linda, and I was perusing it, and I saw there was no changes. But and going forward, I know I always look at the local labor situation and whatnot, and I was reorienting myself or re-educating myself on exactly how that was within. And I know that we're now talking about the bridges and some issues we're having, talking about boards and authorities. I just want to say that the administrative code has always made it pretty clear about that, and that our local labor ordinance applies not just to us, but to anybody who's doing work on behalf of the county, be it board or authority. So I don't know, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. If any board or authority happens to come in and suggest they have some kind of power beyond that, I would recommend to them that they bring a couple solicitors with them.
Well, and where the county is a third-party beneficiary of that contract of the authority, that would be correct. And as someone who, as controller, actually enforced this when they built the Juvenile Justice Center, it's really easy to enforce. You basically just ask for the certified payrolls. I don't even need the personal identifying information other than the first name, middle initial, last name, and address. And GIS actually gave me a beautiful map that is somewhere in the controller's office. I don't think I took that with me. But it's very clear. It shows what that border is into Warren County, New Jersey, Monroe, Carbon, Berks, Bucks. There might be one other in the
But Steve,
west.
can I ask you, and I'm just curious, since this was written, has the 10-mile, is that still functional, or does the administration feel that's still a functional distance, or should it be increased or decreased? I don't know. I mean, we put in 10 at the time. It was worked out. And
I don't think we've given it any additional
all right.
thought.
Okay. I was just curious. It hasn't created any problems, at least up to now. All right. That's all. I just had a question on that. Thank you.
I had a question similar to that. Does it state specifically in here, or is it just a reference to boards or any other authorities? Or is
It actually, under, it says under C3,
Yeah.
the requirements herein set forth shall also apply to contracts pertaining to construction projects carried out by an authority for which the County of Northampton is a third-party beneficiary.
Okay.
And we are clearly, under the P3 contract, the third-party beneficiary. That's in a public-private partnership. The municipal entity is always the third-party beneficiary.
And under, it's on page 1338, under compensation. Should that be addressed as specifically as it is under A1? At least $7 per straight time hour in $1997, or at least $8.15 an hour? Or should it be written to move along with the times in some way?
That is actually, I believe those numbers are still applicable based on what I know of minimum wage, living wage. Those numbers haven't changed much. It's unfortunate. I don't believe that they're I don't believe it's an accurate living wage. I don't know that I don't think it's a reflective living wage personally, but I believe that's what is standard. I didn't see any, I looked this up, I didn't see any reason to change it based on the numbers that were out there.
I just raise it since you're making the amendments now, if there was a way to consider
Understood.
rewriting it.
No,
Thank you.
I looked at it specifically. It requires the basic minimum, like what the minimum is and what the standard is. It's what's out there still on the internet is considered a living wage. And
Do you want to talk about prevailing wage along with this? Maybe that'll help, because I know we use.
I mean, prevailing wage is used in most of these jobs anyway, so that's way, way above the standard. So this just sets the bargain basement based on the current economic standards. I believe this is also put into a lot of just standard language in project labor agreement contracts as well.
Wow.
I know it's a startling number, but
Mr. Heckman.
Yeah, just.
I was shocked too.
For a family of four, though, a living wage?
I know.
Go ahead.
My question has to do with the $25,000 limit. When was that put in place, and what would it be in today's dollars? Would you know?
$25,000 limit. So the last time this was amended was when Joe Brennan was on, for that amount, Joe Brennan was on council, can't think of it.
20 years ago.
Yeah, so $25,000 for a contract. Some people might say it's low. I think it gives us the assurances if we go over that $25,000 that we have some sort of ability to stop the services we're not happy with because we have a 30-day out clause, and it gives us some contractual assurance, like it gives us assurances that we're getting or we can measure the work that's done and provided to the county.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be able to, fill a bunch of potholes anymore for that. I think, that's something maybe to consider in the future. And the other issue, and I think Lori raised this, that I wanted to bring with regard to that, the living wage, it's on page 1338-1, compensation, wage, and benefit. It says, including affordable family health benefits, and this is the one that concerns me. It says company-paid pension benefits, typical of responsible employers. In the private sector, that is just simply no longer applicable. I believe that maybe we ought to consider striking that and changing it from pension to retirement benefits to reflect the fact that 401k or some other benefit would be.
Mr. McGee would like to chime in.
Well, a pension is considered kind of a 401k, but.
I would leave that to council. It
No.
does not, no.
No.
It says paid, and well, most people think of a pension as a defined benefit, whereas a retirement could be either. So that's my suggestion for the group. I don't know.
So you're saying rather than the phrase company-paid pension, it's
Retirement.
Pension/retirement benefits?
Well, I think
Or
retirement
including, but
benefit
not
is more
limited to?
inclusive. That would include both, either a pension or a 401k.
Leave it open, Bill.
So that would also include the health benefit?
I wouldn't
You would
touch
leave
the
that
health
alone,
benefit.
right?
I just want to
Yeah.
change the word pension to retirement.
Does administration have any feelings on that? I'd like to contact you. Any thoughts how that could play out or concerns?
Hold, please.
No, go ahead.
So, I'm sorry, what's the?
We don't have to do it today anyway.
The language says company-paid pension benefits, and what would like to see is us to change it from pension to retirement, which would encompass both a 401k type or 403b as well as a defined benefit
But
pension.
that would be really difference between defined contribution and defined benefit, so it's really, they're both really
Pensions.
pensions.
Well, it's a shared, I guess, if the company shares, like you put in so much, they put in so much.
Isn't there somewhere that you could define pension so that there's clarity? And you don't have to put that
I-
extra verbiage in?
I would just think if you could say and/or retirement, it would encompass everything, and then it would fit everybody's needs.
How about and/or, how about, excuse me, and/or other retirement benefits?
That would be fine.
I'm sorry.
So
Conferring with my
and/or,
union
just
rep.
if you want to add, Linda, then there,
Yeah.
after pension and/or other retirement benefits then?
Does that sound good? Mr. Kusick, you happy with that?
And/or other retirement benefits.
As a practical matter, we're not requiring, I'm sure we're not requiring defined pensions when they're
Right.
contract.
Right.
So and/or,
Okay.
I was just looking at the dollar, so that's a good, I didn't even notice, I didn't notice that.
Can I just ask
so that's the other thing, should we round back to that? What's that?
I could double check that again and round back to the discussion. Again, a lot of these are paid at a prevailing wage. Living wage may be higher. I don't know. I mean, I looked this up, and that was still the definition that I found.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The issue is you're establishing a floor,
yeah.
not a ceiling. And the other issue, the practical one, in that you don't want to get in a position of requiring higher.
Yeah, the operative term is at least, which I think the executive's referring to, so we're saying at least.
Okay.
Mr.
Question.
McGee.
So on page 1333,
Oh,
it's on the bottom, the 1333, just going back to that a little bit, you know, where it talks about the construction projects, and then moving forward to 1336, where it says section 13.19, the purchasing. And I guess my confusion is, what now, and then we're talking about the wage on page 1338. So the wage on 1338, I mean, if it was a construction project, it would automatically, after $25,000 in the county, unless it was an emergency or something, be subject to the prevailing wage. So that would basically just, so I guess, is there something else that I'm not seeing other than construction project where this other $7 an hour? So going back to page 1336, the purchasing, the domestic preference policies, is there more to it than just construction projects here? I'm assuming there is. Okay. So if you purchased some shirts and the people there working made $3, you know, of course they'd have to make minimum wage, or they'd be in. Okay. Well, could we at least? Well, all right. I'm still thinking about this. But,
Okay.
I mean, we should at least have it set at whatever minimum wage is then, and I think it's under minimum wage, unless of course you had the retirement benefits.
actually, yeah, 720 is minimum wage now, isn't it?
Yeah.
8.15 with all the benefits.
Should be at least minimum wage, or
We
Do you want to review it, and we can?
I'll review it
when we
again.
get
that way it would
tomorrow.
always be in compliance as it went up.
That's
If
fine.
it did.
I can review that then. That's fine.
Good catch. All right, I don't know where we're at now. You tell me, Mr. Barry.
That was it.
Technically, we're finished.
Finished.
All right, well,
Do you have a question?
any overall questions?
Does it state anywhere in here what the recourse is if someone fails or violates these policies, other than the last page?
Sure, there's penalties in there.
Hmm?
There's
Just the
a
last
penalty section. It
And
would be,
filing of false information under
yeah, 1320. No elected or appointed official or employee of the county shall intentionally, knowingly circumvent the provisions. They're subject to surcharge and potentially guilty of a misdemeanor, fine not more than $1,000 or both.
Yeah, that seems.
And who does the compliance? Would the controller do that work?
The controller, the county executive, council, they all have responsibility under the administrative code.
But who watches?
Yeah, but I mean, day to day, I think that's Mr. McGee's.
I make sure my staff follows it. I know the controller audits it. That's part of how we found a lot of that stuff.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Werner has a question.
I'm going to interject here. I just looked under state legislation, minimum wage legislation database, based on 14 through 17, 2014 through 17. Pennsylvania is at 725.
Okay.
The rest of the states are higher, $9, $8.30, $9.65.
Well, if council wants to propose changing some of those numbers,
I think we should.
we'll, you know.
Are there any other questions? If anybody who's enthralled with the excitement of nuts and bolts county operations are probably thrilled right now.
This is the hard lifting.
This is the sexy part of county government.
The other sections are a little bit easier. And
okay.
I had to commend the group for doing this.
Yeah, good job.
Would have done this, and I tell you that Article 13 was always a pain in the neck.
So
Nick, where?
while I did most of the typing, it really was a whole team effort to pull this all together. So without Kathy, Terry, and the whole group really digging in and making this priority in the first 2 months that I'm here, and Anthony Sabino, who actually served on the previous committee that edited this, then had it all changed, and it was a lot to get through.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just commend you for this effort, Steve. I agree with what Mr. Werner said. This is a pain in the neck. But while we're on some finance topics, one of the questions that was raised at the Economic Development Committee last month, I believe, was with regard to the assessment of the Old Days Inn down here at the bottom of the hill. And the question was, for the LERTA, will the baseline be the old hotel or a vacant parking lot? Have you been able to research that or discuss that with Cheryl at all?
I have not. I can tomorrow, and hopefully have for you an answer. I think I know the answer, but I'll check with Cheryl.
Well, I think, and the mayor alluded to it, because that was that, he said it goes back to when it's a hotel, and I think we all thought, well, wait a minute, now it's a vacant piece of land. So that was just, I was, you know, that was an issue.
It never really was a hotel. Sorry.
That was a good joke. I actually needed that today.
Short-term rental property.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Day by day, night by night rental property.
Yeah, and then the other question I had was, we've been getting a flurry of emails from CCAP, and I've seen some articles with regard to the voting machine issue and the paper trail, and as to whether or not we would need to implement that for 2020. Have we received any communication from definitively from CCAP with what we have to do?
Yeah, there is actually CCAP is setting up at the Penn State Ag Center Farm Show building.
Oh, yeah.
On next week, a show and tell for what we're going to have there, despite the fact that council went out of their way to make certain that the next machines would be forward compliant. It requires everything becomes decertified and everything would have to become recertified again. And as you may remember, the first new machine that we added, the company couldn't go through the expense of recertifying it, and that seems to be the case here again. Despite the best efforts made by council and the executives in both cases of these machines, the companies just didn't keep up with their end of the bargain, and we're too far downfield to be able to point the finger. So we'll be looking at the next gen on these. There's a possibility that the machines we have now can be recertified. We just don't know that to be true yet.
Now, I understand that the state, it's not a very big amount. There's a certain amount of money that's going to be available. Is that going to be dispersed equally?
That money equates to about how much Philadelphia will need. So
Yeah,
when you look across what we spent the last time, we're going to be getting a pittance, $13 million across 67 counties.
You don't know how that's going to be dispersed yet.
They're still working on that in Harrisburg as well. So that's just the federal monies. That's not what the state may or may not kick in.
Have the members of the Election Commission been invited to that?
This is right now just, I believe. Sure.
The audience can't hear you. I thought there was somebody who was having an issue back there with it.
At present, they're inviting elected officials down. There will be a public showing if they had wanted to come down. But at this point, President Kraft and I were going to just take the trip down there because it's kind of early. This is, as I understand of all the machines that they're going to have available for us to look at, only one is certified at this present point. So this is kind of giving us a sense of what might be available. And just as we went through this process before, we picked several machines that we really liked and found that we couldn't have those. I think we're going to be pretty much in the same boat here again. The certification process is usually arduous, and some people fall out rather than comply. So we may pick something that fits the county's budget, that the voters and the Elections Commission appreciate, only to find out that it's not going to be available. So this is very early in the process. So we're just hoping to get a handle on something to be able to report back to you.
Okay. If there's any interactions with officials down there, would you step in front of Mr. Kraft and do the interacting?
Where is this going to be held again?
The farm show
In
complex in
Harrisburg?
Harrisburg.
And then the other follow-up I had would be, it's my understanding that there may be a special election sometime in July. Are we going to be on the, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's not,
No,
because these cost money.
I don't think we know what's going to happen yet.
If a special election is called, and it is the case in every one of these circumstances, the county is on the hook unless the state comes forward with some monies. They have in the past, but there is no guarantee, there is no promise, and presently there's no special election. So.
And in line with that, I happened when the DA was here, I figured if anybody knew, I said, do you know anything about, and he said he knows nothing at this point. So I guess the campaigns, who knows?
Congressman Dent actually was on a news thing this morning, and his impression was the earliest that they could reasonably have an election to fulfill his unexpired term would be August, given when he is exiting, and he was under no belief when he was pressed on the issue that a special election would be called for.
I guess the court makes the final decision on that if it comes to it. I don't know. Governor. Well. All right. So are there any other questions or matters regarding the Fiscal Affairs Finance Committee meeting? It was
Do you
fun.
need to motion to
Oh,
push this
absolutely.
forward? I can't do it, but I just thought I'd ask that.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Tara can second if you want to. All right, I have motion second. We'll move. We're moving it on tomorrow night, and I assume that the recommendations are noted. The line about the retirement and whatnot. Okay. Are there any other matters?
One more thing on that. Maybe we can consider, and I'll send you something, but maybe we should at least, the minimum wage should be at least whatever the state and federal minimum wages are.
Whatever council's guidance is.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be in line with the rules of the.
$7.25.
Sure.
All right. I think we had the adjournment, and I'm just going to say thank you. We're adjourned. And now there'll be a 5-minute recess, and then we're going to have capital projects and operations. If you have nothing to do this evening. No barking dogs or birds.